wait for the video. I'll do video as well. Bam.
Oh, okay.
So anytime you talk about something, we can bring it up on this screen, and then it'll show up in the video, and then I'll add it to the show notes for the audio version. Cool.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Podcasting studio time. Holly, Sheffy here in the studio, ready to rock and roll. How are you, Holly?
Great.
Nice. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super pumped. We just sold the last August workshop ticket, so that's exciting.
Oh, awesome.
So we'll have the full 6 plus all the farmers, production crew. 2 of the guests are German foreign exchange students, so that'll be exciting.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Kind of get the whole mix of culture and food. So, Holly, we're talking seasonal AF. We're talking farming, Liberation Farms, all the things. You just got a puppy. We'll probably talk about that too. I love dogs. But what I want to start with is your intro, your story, how we got to where you and John are at, because like I just told you before the podcast, I was like blown away and overwhelmed by your house, the food forest, the gardens, the animals, because you're driving and it's just you see the lack of diversity that's happening in the world driving out to where you are.
Yeah.
And then and that storm just came through, so that didn't help. But then we see your place and it's just fruit trees and perennials and all these different ways that you can kind of just tweak your homestead so it provides food, it provides I'm blanking, and John, don't shoot me, but he did the tire thing. I'm still like I told Jade and Zach we need that whole farm tour he does just on video.
Oh, sure.
Because he like sits us down in the tire and I'm like, what are we doing in the tractor tire? And he's like dusting off the sand. It was like something out of a movie, and then he starts drawing like the circles.
Oh, the zones.
The zones,
sure.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And going through all that, I'm like, this is amazing. and then we go out on the farm. So I wanted to get your perspective of everything and how you've gotten to be where you are, why you put up with John, all those things. And something I've realized through doing the farm podcasts with both people, the moms are way more busy than the dudes. Like, you have way more responsibilities. Guys are like, yeah, I can make that work in my schedule. And all the moms and the female leader, it's like, I don't have time for your silly podcast. Like, I got shit to do. So I appreciate you sitting down with me. And yeah,
I think that's a theme. No matter where you go in the world, that's a theme.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're touring your the farms.
Yeah.
I forgot where you just were.
We're in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, women, even in the male-dominated societies, the women are the busiest, and they really run the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the men pretend to run the show.
We're very good at pretending.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book by Mary Zeist. Crap, I'm forgetting her last name, but it's called Woman Hunter, and it's literally about that, like just debunking and breaking down this like man the hunter type bullshit that's been created through the years.
Sure.
And it's amazing, but it's just like she brings all these like hunter gatherer type narratives, and it's super easy to do it now with kind of the Industrial Revolution and farming the way it is now, where you see a lot of places where it is, male led in finger quotations.
Right.
And she's just like showing example after example of how really it's like female leadership work, hunter gatherers. It's like, and I live this because I go out hunting. It's like there's so much downtime where you're not doing a damn thing.
Right.
And then you go to the other side of it. Whoever's staying at home is carrying water, food, taking care of the younger generations, taking care of livestock. If you're doing that, it's like way more work intensive, like carrying water, pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, I suppose I can say that because I'm a woman, but it's the reality here, I think, in a lot of places. Not that the men don't do their part for sure. But I think from where I stand, it's comforting to see, and it's not just here, it's everywhere we go. It's not just women individually, though. It's the groups of women, communities, and we've got a great one here, and I'm so grateful for it.
Awesome.
Yeah, can't do it alone.
So jumping into, I don't know. Let's start. I love background food and farming stories. So what's your earliest memory of farming or food, growing your own? What does that look like for you?
Sure. I don't come from a farm family. I come from a city family. So I grew up in Philadelphia. City, very, very, very big city. And so my memories, though, are food. So my family is Italian, not my mom's whole side, but my dad's side, and that's the side I really grew up with. So my memories are in the kitchen with my grandma and cooking. She made everything from scratch. There was a huge Italian market in South Philadelphia, is where my family's from, several generations, and so the Italian part of Philadelphia. So anyway, you could go down the Italian market, open air market, and there was everything from any kind of vegetable, not grown locally there, but brought in. So this huge farmers market, really, except it wasn't always the farmers selling the things, but there were animals there too. I mean, I remember you just see fish and all the things from the ocean just laid out. People would bring in chickens, and you literally could just pick out your chickens, and they would slaughter it there right there for you. Bakeries, everything was just right there where you needed it, and you'd go and get whatever you needed and come home. And my grandma just made everything from scratch, and so those are my food memories, without knowing where anything came from, but just learning how precious it is to cook, and get everything you need from nearby, learning things from older generations and families and friends and that kind of thing. So I didn't get into farming until I was in graduate school and learning about, really, I guess when I was in school, learning ecologically what goes on with the world, and not knowing that farming could fit into that in a harmonious way. So especially when I was learning, I studied forestry in school, and my mentors were entomologists. So I quickly learned, okay, I want to study insects. And at least when I was in school, which I'd like to think wasn't that long ago, but it was a good number of years ago now, decades even. But when I was in school, and if you wanted to study entomology, you went into the business of killing insects. That was like what you did. And I didn't want anything to do with that. But that was sort of the mentality. Oh, you want to study insects? Well, here, these agricultural programs teach you how to kill insects, and so they don't eat all of your food. And so not wanting to do that, I sort of realized, okay, I don't want to go into the agricultural realm, and I didn't have an ag background. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. I'll go into forestry and study forest insects.
I love that. There's it's crazy how that kind of like black and white kind of thing is how a lot of our systems or our programs, even educational programs, have evolved, where it's just like we're learning just enough about it so we can kill it, because it's all bad. All bugs are bad. It was maybe a month ago, but somebody posted a picture of some beetles on a tree eating the leaves, and 3 or 4 people underneath them were like, this is how you kill them, this is how you get rid of them, blah, 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 blah. And Jeremy Solon was like, whoa, pump the brakes. And he like posted pictures of that beetle, something that looks similar to it, that's actually detrimental to like the local flora. And he's like, whoa, what you have there, yeah, it's eating the leaves, but it's not going to do anything to the tree. Like the tree's going to lose the leaves anyways later in the year, so it's fine. If it's this beetle, then you probably have a problem. And instead of using that to kill it, maybe try this other route. But it's crazy. Like those are the systems we've created where it's just like, just kill it all.
Right.
Whereas, what you're talking about is you wanted to learn about it so you could understand it,
Right.
not dominate it or remove it from the landscape. So I very much appreciate that.
Yeah, I like to think too that even though our systems are set up in that way now, where we learn about insects and how to kill them, it's not. We don't have to continue on that trajectory, right? This summer when we were in Kenya, moving ahead a little bit, but this summer we were in Kenya. We had a student from Madison that was on our trip, and he was an ag and engineering student from Madison, but he had learned about all the conventional ag systems, and he was constantly questioning me on, well, how can we break out of this? This is the system. This is the way things are, and how can we get? It was almost as if we couldn't get out of it because this is the way. This is our infrastructure, and I kept saying, yes, it is the infrastructure that we exist in currently, but it's not that old, and it doesn't have to be that way forever. And I loved that he just kept on kind of pushing me to explain, how can we get out of where we currently are. And so yeah, even though that, even in my school time, now there are programs. There are agroecology programs. There are programs where you can study insects and not just how to kill them. So even though that wasn't an option really when I was going to school, it is an option now and continuing to be more of an option available to students that want to study those kinds of things. So I have a lot of hope. There's a ton of resistance in the in my world that I exist in at the university in more ecological type farming practices, but it's coming. We have to have patience, which is really hard.
I struggle
right.
so bad.
But little by little, we can get there. So it's, even though, and I have to remind myself of this all the time, but even though things are the way they are, they don't have to always be that way. And they weren't always this way, right? It's really been a very short period of time, literally a few decades, where we've been doing what we're doing now, and we don't have to always do things that way.
I love it. So we're going to double back. So
sure. Sorry.
No, not a problem. That will be the way this podcast works. Back and forth. Because that's just typically how my brain works. There's no linear progression. So did you want to talk about your undergrad at all? Was there like an epiphany for forestry and...
I think it was more in graduate school. As an undergrad, I did some teaching. I had a job. It was actually doing bird work, but I was able to teach some with my instructor, and that was so fascinating to me. I was 19, and I was leading these labs to teach graduate students and community members who were much older than me how to identify birds and look for bird nests. And it was just this amazingly powerful thing to be able to teach people. Even though it was, at the time, it was just how to identify birds by their call and by their site and where they nest and things. But to me, that was so amazing. I thought, okay, I want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had no experience with kids, and it was frankly kind of terrifying to think of being a school teacher, kids teacher. And so I thought, I want to be a professor. And so that led me on the trajectory. Well, if you want to teach at the college level, you have to get a PhD. And I felt like, okay, I'm going to just go for it, even though I'm just going to do it and get it over with, sort of thing. There's a lot of school, ahead of me, and I just kind of wanted to get it done. So I just went for it. But yeah, it was interesting looking for programs where I wanted to study insects, but not how to kill them. And so it led me into these ecology, forest entomology programs, which is where I am now. I'm trained as a forest entomologist, pathologist, And so that's where I was for a bit, but I learned in graduate school about farming and how you could actually farm in an ecological way. And so it kind of brought together these places in my life where I was studying ecology of more natural systems, but it brought that together with people and food and needs of people to grow things, and not just take care of the environment in these isolated places where there's no people, but actually integrating people and taking care of the land at the same time providing for people. And that was the epiphany, I think, for me, was, and it still is a real challenge, because I feel like even where I am currently teaching, the sentiment is, here's how to manage land without people in it. And that's just, it's not a reality. And I think what helps me see that more than anything is not my work in the U.S., but my work abroad, where there's so many people. There's no land to just have preserves. It's just not a reality. And so we need to take care of the land and the people. And so anyway, that was that connection that I was kind of needing in my life. And so that's where we are now, kind of trying to manage systems in an ecologically sustainable way, but taking care of people too, raising food, raising young people. So that's kind of where I am now, I guess. Those things merged together, and yeah, that's great.
I love it, and I've witnessed it firsthand at your house. So it's like the energy there of what you're talking about is very obvious. Like you're standing. There's just, going back to birds, all these bird noises, and birds are crazy. Like the more time I spend outdoors, from the migratory patterns, just how they kind of interact, or like the birds that store nuts and can remember like where they store them. It's quite crazy. And yeah, especially the migratory patterns of any animal. Like they can follow the exact route back, only having done it one other time. So that's crazy. But so where were we at? You're in school. I was thinking of the timeline.
That's okay.
Have you met John at this point yet?
So I didn't meet John until I moved to Stevens Point.
Okay.
So when I was finishing graduate school, I was honestly trying to not get a job because I just kind of needed a break. I was in school for a long time. At this point, I was living in the UP of Michigan and thought, well, there's no better place in the world than this. And so I was trying to stay there. But not... there's also a lot of pressure, mostly from my family, saying you've just gone to school for a million years and you need to get a job. I thought, okay, fine. So I just kind of fell into this job at Stevens Point, doing really exactly what I wanted to do, which was teach undergrads, and in a really applied program where we are outside all the time and in a place where people really cared about the environment. And yeah, just really undergrad focused program, because I came from University of Michigan in graduate school, which is focused more on graduate students and I in research, and I wasn't that interested in that. So anyway, I got this job at Stevens Point, and that's where I met John.
Okay. With the Stevens Point job position, or when you're working with undergrads, what were like some of the hurdles to the system? Because you've been talking about actually being able to apply these systems for people and land to coexist, where one kind of like, what can we do to help the land better provide for us so we kind of stay out of its way
Sure.
or don't damage it. Do you remember what were some of the barriers you were coming across, or where some of the early successes were, I guess, from that position?
Sure. I guess to start with the success, and something I loved right away when I came here, was that the students here in Point tend to be very connected with the land. They grew up there, a lot of rural folks that grew up hunting, fishing, in the outdoors. Certainly not all of them, and it is changing, where we have more folks from more urban areas. But now it's almost 15 years ago that I started here, and majority rural backgrounds, and the students really were connected with the land, and they knew their place. And that was something, not being from this area, it took me a long time to really understand where the students were coming from. Mm-hmm. Even though I'd lived in Michigan for almost 15 years, so I felt like I was sort of a Midwesterner, even though I didn't grow up in the Midwest, but I was slowly becoming one. But that was something I really felt made my job easier, because I didn't have to convince the students why they should take care of the land, or why it was important to be stewards of the land. But I think it's more in the job setting, especially a lot of our students work in urban areas where aesthetics take priority over ecological systems. And so it was sort of what you were saying earlier, that, the perspective of a beetle eating a leaf, and how it can be a lot of people's perceptions of that as, okay, how do I kill this beetle? And that is the reality of a lot of my students, and where they're going in their jobs is, it doesn't matter how much they can say, well, my professor said that this is not going to kill the tree, so it doesn't matter if it's feeding on the leaves. The reality is, people don't want beetles feeding on their leaves, and they want to know how to kill them. And so that's a continued challenge for me, mm-hmm. to find that balance, and let the students know that if you do have a client that is interested in controlling things in a more ecologically sustainable manner, these are your options, or this is what you can say. I usually tell them to start with that. It's not going to kill the tree. And sometimes people are fine. A lot of people will just stop right there and say, oh, great, thanks, and move on. Yep. But there's always going to be folks that want their plants to look so beautiful without any kind of pests. And so then you have organic or less toxic ways of killing or reducing. I usually say, reducing numbers, reducing populations so that they're not noticeable. Mm. And then some people are just going to go the full way, and there's, and I always tell my students, if that makes you uncomfortable, you need to switch to something else, and in a climate where you're working with landowners and they're going to choose you or someone else, if you don't want to do what they want, they're going to go somewhere else. And so trying to work with them with their desires as much as possible. A lot of it's just education, right? And so I try to give the students that confidence to say, yes, I understand these beetles are eating your leaves, but it won't kill the tree. And really, it's okay, and a lot of people are appreciating that. Yeah. Not everyone, certainly, but that's a challenge for sure.
Mm-hmm. This is me backpedaling a little. Sure. Was the transition from New Jersey to Michigan, what was that like?
Oh, sure. So, I went to school out west in Flagstaff, Arizona. So my parents grew up in South Philadelphia, and their parents had grown up there, and they hadn't really gotten out, and they were really sort of said, go wherever you want for school. So I kind of felt like I needed to get out a little bit. And they have a really good program in northern Arizona, and so a forestry program. So that was sort of my way of getting out a little bit. And it was funny out there. All my friends were from the East Coast. And I learned the more I traveled out west, is that everyone is from the East Coast. Like, nobody's from Arizona. Nobody. I had one friend from California, but the East Coast is so nuts, so crowded, and just crazy that people just want to get out. But something that really struck me, and that I didn't realize until I moved to Michigan, was that nobody's connected with those spaces. They're vast and amazing, mountains and, just picturesque, amazing places. I did nothing with my time outside of school, but hike and bike and camp and just explore these amazing places. But nobody is really grounded there or connected with the land there. We're all from somewhere else. And at the time, it didn't matter to me. I was just really enjoying that. But when I moved to Michigan, one thing that really grounded me was the water. There's no water in Arizona. And all the water that exists is all aquifers that are drying and reservoirs that are man-made and super gross water, right? It's like you don't want to go swimming there because it's the only place to go swimming in 100 miles and everyone's going there, And I never realized those things about how important it was to be connected to the land or to even be connected. I didn't understand that concept until I went to Michigan, and it was green and it was wet and it was just, I was real, even though I'd never lived there or been there before, the water and the diversity in the landscape made me feel like that was my place. And so then I guess then I started to recognize how important that connection with the land was, and that's why when I moved to Stevens Point, I was really impressed with the students' connection to the land where they grew up, because I just didn't have that. I didn't realize that until I was quite a bit older. I can't remember what your original question was. Oh, no, was it a big transition? Sure. You
touched on it, yeah, right there.
Yeah, so I'm grateful of where I grew up, because I think, I feel really comfortable in cities. Not everyone does.
Yeah, I'm not that way.
I love going home, and because I love just bringing my kids now to the places that I went when I grew up. I love taking buses and subways and just everything there is, trains, everything there is about public transportation. I miss that more than anything. I love it. And so I appreciate growing up in a city where when I was a little kid, I could get anywhere on a bus. And just, I don't know if it's even safe to do that anymore, but which is unfortunate, of course. But as a kid, me and my sister, we could take buses wherever, and it was not not an issue at all. I miss that public transportation part. So I'm grateful for the city upbringing in that regard. But it is quite a difference between between that and where I am now. But I think that just goes to show you never really know where you're gonna go or end up, and that's what's so cool about life, I guess. It just
for sure.
It just brings you to unexpected places. And some of my friends are doing what sort of you would expect. They went to college and got married and had kids, and they live in the suburbs of where I grew up, and that's like what you do, right? And but then I'm this outlier, and people, even my parents, I think, are still a little bit like, what happened? How did you get here? Even my sister is still in the city and doing her thing. No one in my family is doing what I'm doing. But yeah, you just never know, I think. You just take opportunities. At least that's what I've been doing, just kind of going where it seems right. Mm-hmm. So there's benefits to everywhere, right? Wherever you are. And so, yeah.
Nice. So in the 15 years you've lived here, you've had the urban farm in town.
Yeah.
You started the tuning fork.
Yeah.
You've done liberation farms. You've been a professor at the university. Anything else? There's obviously a lot in 15 years, but sure. Anything else you want to cover? Because we're going to dive into all of those things.
Well, I feel like the new things. Well, now we have kids.
Oh,
so
kids.
That's
a family.
Family. So that is, another journey. And our cafe is the next step. I think tying a lot of things together for us, anyway.
Let's start diving into each of these. Which one do you want to? Should we start with the urban,
Sure.
the urban farm?
Sure. I mean, when I met John, we were just starting the beginnings of what is now Farm Shed, and we wanted to grow food, and we lived in town, and we just turned our whole yard into a garden. And I think what was so great about being in town, we're right on Maria Drive, right across the street from the church there. We were very visible, and I like that because lots of people would stop and just stare at our place, and it was a little bit awkward at times. Is that
where food comes from?
Right. It was awkward at times, but and sometimes I just wished I had some personal space, you know. But I think the awareness factor was very high there. I really like that. I like that we could show, hey, you can actually feed yourself. Instead of having this lawn and fighting the lawn and all these things, you can...
Killing everything,
right. So that was great. John's family had a farm in southwest Wisconsin that we were growing things on a little bit larger scale at that point, kind of just figuring out what we wanted to do and realizing that we wanted more space and wanted to grow more. And so the urban farm was just the beginning, I guess. And then when our daughter was born, it made us quicken the pace in terms of finding a place where we could grow food on a larger scale. We didn't want to be in town anymore. We wanted to have more space, but have more ability to do more things. And so the farm that we have now was not a farm before we bought it, but we were looking for space. We were looking for, to be honest, we wanted a place that had, a building, a shelter, a home that was not enormous. And we talked for a while about building, and then we knew that wasn't, when was that actually going to happen? So we got really lucky. We found the place that we had a really small house on it. But it had, it wasn't a farm, so it didn't have a barn or any outbuildings or anything like that. So we kind of had to start from scratch. But that's also been good. So then we have things that are sort of to our scale and as we need them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was really, we were traveling a lot when we were in town. In the week during the week I was at work in town, but then we would drive to southwest Wisconsin to farm, and so we knew that wasn't very sustainable. Mm-hmm. And even though, another thing I learned along the way too, southwest Wisconsin is so gorgeous. Mm-hmm. But the community that we have here is priceless. Mm-hmm. And so maybe we don't live in a super picturesque place in terms of trout streams and coulees and rivers and or mountains or whatever. The landscape may not be as stark or as amazing as some other places. The people, we have such an amazing community here that I wouldn't go anywhere else. And so that was something that we realized when we were looking for a farm, because we had talked about moving to southwest Wisconsin to be closer to the farm, or we couldn't really move to the farm, but we could live close by, or moving somewhere else, some other place that we were familiar with, or just wanting more open space, maybe more, again, that sort of pull to be near more natural landscapes instead of in the craziness where we live now of large-scale monocultures. But we realized, we could have done that, and we would have started over and had to build a whole new set of relationships and community. And we realized that was nuts. Mm-hmm. We have the most amazing community here. And so for me, I think as I learn more, it's really all about people, not just the land, but people and relationships. And we're kind of starting over right now with our cafe and almond, right? We're not from that area, but everyone else is, right? Yep. And so we are grateful that we are being welcomed into this community that we've lived in for almost 9 years now, but nobody knows us because there's nowhere to go and meet people.
Now there is.
Now there is, and that's what we wanted. And that's why one of the main reasons why we opened where we did. It needs something. It needs a community space. And so anyway, I think, again, I'm all over the place, but
no, I'm following
I
you.
think,
but that doesn't say much because my brain's all over the place.
Yeah, I think the people are our farming community that we're a part of and been a part of, and all the women, all my girlfriends, the most amazing people. So that has brought us to where we are now, really.
Shout out to all the girlfriends out there.
Absolutely.
Nice.
They're the best.
So going, I don't know if this is back or in a
Who
circle.
knows?
So then you have your daughter. Farm Shed is, I'm not sure, still just starting.
Just starting. We used to meet on Friday mornings at 7 for breakfast.
Oh my God, I love breakfast. The best things happen during breakfast.
Absolutely. I love those times. I mean, to think about doing that now is challenging. But at the time, I mean, I think, Jeremy might have been the only one with kids. All of us that were starting out were in a different place. And in our lives, and it was, Friday morning breakfast was the thing. That was where we met. We took time before everyone had to go to work and do crazy stuff. And I remember how challenging it was to even find a place where we could go that like served food that we wanted to eat. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I remember trying to coordinate eggs. Like we had 3 chickens, so we weren't getting a ton of eggs, but it was like, how can we get enough local eggs to have a breakfast on Friday morning? It's amazing where we are now.
I was gonna say, now I can bike within 4 miles of my house in probably just about any direction, and there's 2 or 3 houses that I can stop for eggs.
Yeah.
And that's like, I just do a bike loop, and I'm more excited when most places are out because then I get to bike further.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it's really, things have come so far, and I think that again is just a testament to the amazing farmers and farming community that we have, but also the consumer side of things. We're all consumers, but the people being willing to kind of go out on a limb and support those of us that are doing things differently, because we wouldn't be here if people weren't going to buy our stuff, right? So,
True.
Yeah.
So all this is going on. Your family moving out to the farm. Was Liberation Farms, was that an entity then, as soon as you moved out, or did that happen later?
That was, I don't know that we had a name right away, but the farm started right away. I mean,
so that's going on, the creation of Farm Shed. How does that all then trickle back into your teaching, your educating, working with these young minds? What is that? How does that all feed together?
Well, one maybe obvious connection that I had right away was when I started. So the year that I started in 2006, our friend Yasha Steinmetz, who's another instructor at the university, she had organized the Sustainable Agriculture and Community Society, which was a brand new student organization. They had got a space for a student garden, and she was just getting that going when I started. So I think they started the semester that I came here. And pretty quickly she realized, I need someone else to take this on. And I was new and excited, and I said, yeah, of course, because that's what you do when you're new and excited.
I love those people.
I'm grateful they exist now because I'm not one of them anymore. But anyway, so that was an obvious connection because it was challenging for me to find that connection in my sort of everyday job of teaching forestry students. I was just trying to figure out what to do at that time. But these students that were really interested in sustainable ag at a non-ag school, and that's been a huge fight for me. But that gets into some politics. But anyway, yeah, right. But these students that were not at an agriculture school, but they wanted a garden and they wanted to have a space where they could experiment and produce food. There was a cafe, is still a cafe on campus. They wanted to provide food for that. I just think they wanted some space to experiment, and for people that didn't come from a farming or gardening background to have that opportunity. So I fell right into that because I was new. I had the capacity to take it on. So then there were all these students that sure wanted to work in this garden and make it happen, but then I had a farm that they could come and learn on. And there are these other farms that were starting. And so a lot of the students were working on these new CSA farms. And so that was an obvious connection for me, an easy one, because then the students knew me, and so then not only could they come to our farm, but I could help them find other farms to work and volunteer on and learn from. And so even though a lot of them weren't my forestry students, so it was a way for me to meet other students and have that outlet in a way that wasn't really what I was doing in the classroom necessarily.
Well, and I think this goes for anyone that's coach like myself, educator like yourself, farmer, parent, those of us that are putting all this thought into what we're doing, how we're interacting with the environment, how our system, like what our systems are doing, having that other thing that kind of allows us fresh air to like put all the pieces together is so important.
Absolutely.
So important. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that.
Right.
So then you get burnt out with the things you were passionate about, or you get frustrated or depressed. All these things happen because you're not giving yourself that time to just like breath of fresh air, something that's super novel, exciting, that it's okay to fail at because it's not like your primary thing where you have to have your A game every day. But yeah, so I totally get that. I appreciate where you're coming from with that. That's awesome. So you got all the things going on. So in your free time then, because it sounds like you've got a ton of it at this point, you start the tuning fork. Where does that come from? I guess the idea for it.
Sure. So John had started that. Again, I think it was the semester that I came here. He had started that with his roommate, Danae, and they invited me on to talk about bees.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, that is that connection of, in the things that I can, I say sort of sneak in to my professional world at my job at the university, but. Again, it's and a lot of people are on board now, but it's like bees are really important. I can talk about bees. I know about bees. I'm an entomologist by training. Bees are really important to our food system and our world, right? And so it was sort of, again, this thing where I can talk about insects and not how to kill them, but actually how important they are and how to create habitat for them and preserve them and all that good stuff.
All the good things. We had a bee swarm at the gym that I posted a video of on
wow.
Facebook. I didn't know it was a swarm at the time. I had no idea what that was. I just like, oh, this crazy beehive. And I had 6 messages within 20 minutes of posting that. It's not a hive. It's a swarm. Also, I can come get it, or someone I know can come harvest it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like it was like a super educational moment for me. But yeah, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was just literally the length of my arm.
Yeah.
Like thousands of bees. Because one of the little girls comes in the gym. She's like, Coach Bill, there's bees outside. I'm like, there's always bees outside. She's like, no, there's bees outside. And her eyes were huge. I'm like, okay. And I go out there, make sure no one gets stung. And I walk out there. I'm like, oh, there's bees outside. So yeah, that was a crazy. Just I'm still like, that happened. There was just this huge swarm of bees. And then I was educated through social media. So everyone that hates on social media, it's not all bad.
Right.
It's a great form of communication. But anyway, so you swept John off his feet with your knowledge of bees. He was infatuated with you and your knowledge of bees.
So then that next semester, I started hosting it with him. So yeah, him and Danae had started, I think, in the fall of 2006. And then I started hosting it with him.
Which of you is the better host?
I like to think we were a pretty good team.
Pretty good team?
Yeah, I think so.
What was your strategy as a host? What was your voice, I guess?
I feel that at the time, I was DJ Bumblebee.
DJ Bumblebee.
That was the name.
Fantastic.
I don't know how that name came, but
well,
that was
other
my
than,
name.
you talked about bees your first episode.
Yeah, so for me, I was learning so much at the time, and so my perspective was this new person to Wisconsin and new person to central Wisconsin, but a lot of the things we were doing were totally new to me. And so I was trying to sort of motivate folks, like anybody can do what we're doing because I'm just starting and it's super fun. And we were doing a lot of wild harvesting at the time, and I was really learning a lot about seasonal foods and when things are ripe, and we were doing a lot of talk about what every week it was sort of, what did we do since the last radio show? What did we harvest, and how did we prepare it, and where did we find it, and what to do? So it was I was trying to make it as practical as possible, but it wasn't like I had to try because it was just new to me. So we're talking about harvesting morels, and so it was just whatever was ripe or in season at the time, whether it was a wild harvest and then we would get into the gardening season and talking about all of these things throughout the year. So it was fun. It was fun for me because we were doing these things together and learning a lot, but then I was able to talk about it, and we'd get calls all the time. That was really fun. During the music breaks, people would call in and ask questions or tell us something, and that was really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was, I don't know, I really enjoyed being on the radio. I'm not shy, I'm a teacher, but the radio was a totally new thing for me, and I loved it because it was just it's another outlet, but another way to connect with people.
Definitely.
Yeah, and we started having other people on the show, so that was when we thought, I think people probably want to hear from other people instead of just us. So that was fun too, getting to interview folks. I think at that point though, that made us realize we had to plan, right? I mean, it was easy for us to just show up at the radio station and just talk about what we were doing. But then when we started having other people, this, right? You have to coordinate schedules and things, and it became more challenging. And then once our daughter was born, which was the Brussels sprout, that was her name, and she would, she was in the studio making all kinds of noise, and we realized it was time to pass the torch to someone else.
Yeah.
And it's still going, which is awesome.
It is awesome. I'm excited to be on it. next week. Next week. Um, with so then you've kind of passed the torch for the tuning fork. Your farm. Do you have livestock and everything right away?
Yeah. So we moved in the late fall. So we brought our chickens from town out. But
all three of them?
Yeah.
How
or
long,
we might have had 4 at the time. I can't remember.
How quickly were they integrated into the local food cycle? As in, did they get predated fairly quickly?
No, the next summer they did. Yeah. So that next summer, well, wait a minute. Gosh. I'm trying to think. I think, yeah, it was not until the next spring we got 3 pigs and started making space for gardens and things. But yeah, then we were gone. So we teach a class in Kenya every summer. We had our friend Jenny that was farm sitting for us, but she had another job. And yeah, one day when we were gone and she was gone, something ate the chickens. It never was seen what it was, but something.
There's so many things I love chicken.
Oh yeah, there's no shortage of things. So it wasn't that long. It was they survived through the winter, but then that next summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had pigs. We got pigs right away. We thought of our farm, the way I think anyway about it, currently is a restoration project. It hadn't been farmed, but it had been it had a lot of disturbance on it. Lots of exotic and invasive plants, just highly disturbed area. And so we took this on as a restoration project, and we thought, if we want to grow food in this literal sandbox, it's, if you call it loamy sand, I think you're really generous. We need some fertility, and we can bring in a whole bunch of fertility from somewhere, or we can create our own. And so that was the pig adventure. Then we were like, well, pigs can help us, and animals provide a lot of services. And so that, even though neither of us had ever raised anything more than chickens, we decided, that's what we needed to do. So the pigs were the first big livestock that we purchased.
And they'll eat anything. They're good at rooting stuff up too.
Yep. Yeah, they're amazing, right? Except they do, we didn't have any fencing.
Yikes.
And so that was challenging. We were using portable electric fencing and trying to figure it all out. And,
failing forward.
We're still doing that. We're still, but at least now we have fencing around our perimeter. And
the goat fence is a perfect example of what you're talking about with restoration and having the animals do the work, because you can see like where that cart has been moved in the field versus what you're, the loamy sand, where it's just like kind of sad prairie grasses, and then where those goats have been, it's just like vibrant green everything. So it's I think John was saying very similar. He's like, we're just getting to the teenage years of the property where you can kind of see where everything's going to start the fruit to grow and actually start to build itself up. So
yeah.
Super cool. What's your favorite part of the whole process, or part of the property? What are you most excited about?
Gosh, it's hard to choose. One of the things that I'm really excited about, the goats are probably my favorite of the animals, and right now we're milking just one goat for milk and making cheese and yogurt and things. And I think that for me, being able, I don't know, we're trying as much as we can to provide everything that we need for ourselves. And that's been a fun journey. And yeah, at some point we were producing all of our veggies and hunting and fishing, and we have plenty of meat, don't need that much meat. But I was buying dairy products. That was like the only thing that I was buying. And we don't really drink milk, but it was sort of I really like yogurt and butter and those sorts of things. And I was like, we don't want a cow. I don't need that much milk. But I really enjoy milking. Actually, that's one of the things. I'm an early morning person, and
you're on the right podcast.
One of the best things is milking in the morning. It's quiet.
Really?
Nothing else. I don't like as much milking in the afternoon because it's hot.
Flies
and
are
crazy,
out.
yeah. But the morning and milking by hand is actually the first time I ever milked anything was in Kenya, and that was a cow, and I was amazed at first at, I guess, how much milk you can get from one cow because I didn't grow up knowing that
I do
sort
it wrong,
of things.
and the cow takes offense.
Right, but it is just this amazing process, and you're hanging out with an animal, and you're getting this super amazing product, and it's quiet. Everything else is sort of slow and or sleeping and whatever, and I really enjoy that. The mornings are definitely the best part for me.
I like it.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I've had the talking about growing everything for yourself. I've had many of the products from your farm. They're all delicious. From the desserts, the quiche, all of the sausage products. John's just like, yeah, I got this one from Underground. I'm like, I'll take 2. Fill the basket. So it's all good. I want to. So you were talking about kind of your diet, and I mean that from the sense of the like what you eat to survive, not what it is in the health and fitness space, which is like weird 30-day. People are like, oh, I'm keto. I'm doing Whole30. Like, as much as I love these things, like it's just there's no sustainability to it.
Sure.
People do it because it's the new buzzword and they jump on top of it, and then at the end of it they're like, I lost weight but then I gained it all back because I starved myself or I completely eliminated whole food groups from my diet, not realizing that's not sustainable for how I live, where I live, what do I enjoy eating, what have I grown up culturally eating. Like all of that plays a huge part in our actual true diets from like a species, both seasonally, geographically. But for yourself, what has this, what is your evolution of food, nutrition? What does that look like?
Sure. So as I said earlier, I grew up with this, I didn't grow up eating everything, I guess, or making everything from scratch. I mean, I think my memories of my grandma and cooking with her were mostly holiday type special things. Like my grandma didn't live with us, although we did live with her for a time. But for most of my upbringing, we didn't live with her. And my parents tried their best to provide for us. And, but they did a good job. But we ate plenty of processed food and food that now I would not want to serve my children, which I feel bad about saying that because my parents were trying, right? They weren't trying to poison us or anything. Yeah. It was just that they just didn't, that was the time, yeah. And they worked miracles and worked different shifts and things to make things work. So, but we all learn about what works best for us or what we're most interested in. And I think for me, I pay a lot of attention to sort of where things come from, how they're raised or grown or produced. And I think part of it is trying to find that balance. I mean, there's no right answer, as you say. Like, everyone's got their things that they're focused on. And I try to produce the healthiest food. And when I say that, healthiest food from an environmental standpoint, trying to grow things that don't need a huge amount of inputs. Mm-hmm. But also, and also inputs, not just like fertilizer or whatever, but also sort of this maintenance thing. Like, we're, we're not just farmers. And when I say just farmers, I mean farming isn't the only thing that we do. We have a lot of other things pulling us in a lot of directions. And so trying to grow things that can live with some, kind of do things on their own. They don't need constant, some neglect, right?
They're resilient.
The resilient, strong things. But yeah, things that are going to provide us with healthy food. I mean, healthy food comes from a healthy environment, and it makes people healthy, right? So I think diversity is really important there. And my kids help me with that, right? They help. Like, we had this again, right now we're like eating squash and zucchini with every meal, and it's like, how many ways can you prepare that? But the kids are good reminders that people need diversity. I mean, I think at this point, when you're busy, you can just eat whatever you have, right? But the kids are like, nope,
Again.
Yeah. But it's good. I think everyone needs that. Everyone needs the diversity of foods. And in moderation too, right? So I think the kids help us see, even we talk about maple syrup, like, oh, this is really, this is sweet, but you can eat it. And it's like, well, yeah, you can't just drink the whole bottle, but it's good for you. And it comes from our farm, and, it's part of you and part of your diet. And so,
oh wait, sugar's not a bad thing.
Right?
Yeah, you can eat sugar. It's there.
But it is a good way, right? So it's those things. And I mean, even the kids, they get these things in school telling them to eat this way. They're with their friends and they're told to eat this way. And I mean, there's all these different competing things. I'm sure, right, you more than anyone get these,
all of the things.
Right. And
I've tried everything except being consistent.
Right. So I think for me, the diet part is really just making sure that that I and my family and the people that are buying our products can have healthy food. And if you're eating food that was grown in a sustainable way, that's taking care of the environment, then I think it's going to take care of people too. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think we're always learning and changing and working with what we have. I guess that's another piece of it too. Like, we have a lot of this right now. This is what we're going to eat. Mm-hmm. But learning about that cycle is really exciting too.
I love that. There's forget where I heard it from, but it's coming from the hunting side of things, is where's the best place to hunt? Because everybody, especially now, so in the world of hunting, like Western hunting is like the big thing.
Oh, sure.
Go out west, hunt elk, blah, 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 blah. And some bigger names in hunting and conservation are looking, and wildlife management are like, the best place to hunt is the closest place to your house. Like, that's where you want to spend most of your time, your resources. So resources being time and money. Sure. From a conservation standpoint, from a land management standpoint, just from a bigger awareness of like your systems, like we've been talking about from the beginning. Clean water, clean air, mm-hmm. access. Like thinking the far and away place is the best place might cause the degradation of your local
Absolutely.
One. And that's something I've been trying to stress in the gym, and that's the whole reason for the seasonal AF when I approached Lane was I'm seeing all of these great things in the gym, in health and fitness when it comes to food. Finally, people are not afraid of food. It's not about just the processed, fortified, weird bars and things and the meal replacement shakes and the powders and the potions being like, this is health. This is what you need to be healthy. It's all these weird concoctions, or the superfoods. Like the superfoods from far and away. Like you realize rainforests are being totally raised just to grow these superfoods. Right. When it's like you can get the same vitamins and minerals and meet your magical macros from all of these foods that are grown around you. Both, as you're talking, the wild seasonal foods, wild game, and all of these amazing farmers. Like instead of buying this superfood antioxidant green mix, eat the entire beet. Greens, eat the entire radish, the whole radish, the greens, everything. bringing that awareness to health and fitness and people that are they like we were talking about with parents, that they're people that mean well. No, hardly anyone wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to be a terrible person, pollute the world, blah, 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 blah. Everyone means well, and it's just bringing more awareness, like what you're talking about, farming, the food systems, and bringing it back into the school setting. So, yeah, I'm a big fan in what you're doing on your farm with your family, educating the kind of the model you set for everyone.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing too. I think part of our challenge certainly is reaching out to new groups of people. We have amazing regulars that we see at the farmers market every week that are dedicated. And so how do we get more people on board, right? How do we get more, different kinds of folks? I think the folks that you're working with are an awesome, example of people that are really paying attention to what they're eating. And so if they can learn about how they can get all of those things that they are interested in putting in their body locally, that's amazing. So what you're doing is wonderful for everyone. I mean, it's great for us because we're, of course, but I think that helps because that's not a group of people that is necessarily thinking about farming and how their food's grown. They're thinking about the nutrition and what's being put in their bodies. Yep. And I think for us, when we're, say, leading trips abroad, working with students or community members, that's those groups of folks that aren't already on board are the most important people, right? I mean, I want to say most important, but they're the folks that need that connection. I mean, I needed that. I needed someone to make that connection. I eventually, made the connection through learning from other people. But when we have, say, business students or psychology students or students that are not already thinking, they're not hunters, they're not thinking about natural resources, they're not thinking about where their food comes from, they're thinking, from so many of the people, all of us, we're motivated by like what we want to study in school or something. But I think food is a great way to bring everyone together because everyone eats, and no matter if you're studying business in school, you still need to, eat and know it's important. I think I would say like it's still important for you to know where your food is coming from and how you're going to feed yourself and your family and all of those things. And so I think bridging that, those folks that aren't always thinking about the environment or about food, we can help bring them into buying more local products and being more aware of what is available locally.
Definitely. Love it. Well, we're over an hour. So that was like a great concluding thought, but sure. Do you want to kind of summarize all of it? Food systems, health, parenting, teaching, everything. What do you want to leave people with?
I think for me, more and more, it's all of those things are connected to the people that we interact with and in our communities. So I think if we can grow our super amazing community structure, like having support systems and having places where people can go to just meet each other or learn from each other or just be with each other, having space, and maybe it is outdoor places, even like the farmers market or farms, places where people can come together and learn from one another. And when I say support systems, it can be sort of that if there's a problem, but also just places where people can feel comfortable asking questions and learning from one another. I think those are the most important things right now for me anyway. So building our community and having healthy communities. I think if people are healthy, then they're going to want to help others be healthy, right? And that will strengthen our farming communities, because then people will want to buy healthy food and take care of the environment. So I think it's really, I'm so grateful for our community. I mean, you are a relatively new addition to my world, right? I haven't known you for very long, but it's been amazing to get to know you. I think it's just going to continue to grow. More and more people that are interested in what we're doing, no matter what background they come from or where they were before. I think that's where it's at.
Nice. I love it. So, Holly, you're busy. Everyone can reach you at Liberation Farmers.
Yeah.
Stopping at Taco Tuesdays.
Absolutely.
At the cafe. Mm-hmm. Brunch Sundays.
Yeah.
If you want catering done, they're the place to do it. Almond, Wisconsin. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Cool. Later, everyone.